Okay, so let me tell you something about saving money. All right, we're gonna take a trip to the freaking library as a way to save money. All right, so here's the deal. Like, if you've watched one of my videos, like I talk about the fact that as a family, we're wanting to relocate to Vietnam, and as part of relocating to Vietnam, I haven't been working for over a year and a half or something like that. I don't keep track. I think it was 2025, April or March of last year. So now I'm needing to go get a job. And as part of needing to go get a job, I need to print my resume. I have an interview tomorrow. But to save money, we don't have a printer. So we don't have a printer all because we want to save money. I don't know about you, but I think printers are the biggest scams that ever exist. Okay, so the thing with printers is, for us at least, our experience has been we buy a printer, and then after we buy a printer, we use it for like a year or so, and then it runs out of ink. And we try to save money by buying an ink that is off-brand, but is compatible with our printer. However, after we do that, it stops working every single time. We have bought like 4 printers, and we're not talking about like cheap printers. Like, when I buy something, I try to have it be the top of the line item so that it is not going to break down on me. It's not a cheap thing, so I don't have to keep on replacing. I buy with quality in mind. And all 4 printers we have purchased have somehow miraculously just stopped working. It's crazy. So to run money, we made the executive decision to never ever buy a printer. But the problem is, we still need to print stuff, especially in those rare cases where we need to print resumes, right? A new job and so forth. Or sometimes our kids like to print out some drawings and things so they can color it. That's when we go to the library to go ahead and print out those items. So what I'm trying to say here is that there really is a good lesson to be learned here, right? It really isn't that hard to save money if you really wanted to. And some of the things you might consider as inconveniences are really not inconveniences. So how I look at it is this: like, instead of having to buy a new printer every so often because the old one I had stopped working, or having to buy at a cost premium for the ink that is made by the same maker of the printer, instead of paying that for however often we print stuff. And really, if we look at it, it's really not that often that we print things, as indicated by the fact that on a random Tuesday I'm driving to a library to go print something, a total of like maybe 20 pages, because I have multiple copies and so on and so forth. So, and my kids only come to libraries to print items like once every 2 or 3 months. So really, it's not that very cost effective for me to own a printer, and instead I already pay for a printer by way of the library. So this is just kind of ways in which, if you've watched my previous video, you know that as a family, my wife and I, my entire family as a whole, we've made some ridiculous amount of sacrifices to be able to have the opportunity for not only to be possibly retired early, but also to thrive despite it all, and not need to be part of this work cycle that is extremely toxic. But given the fact that now we are strongly trying to plan for our relocation abroad, whether it's Thailand or Vietnam or maybe some location in Africa, it's necessary for me to work for a purpose right now, to go back to work for about a year and a half or so, probably just a year, depending on how much I can tolerate, to be able to save up some additional monies more for the capital necessary to both relocate somewhere and as well as capital necessary to do some type of business opportunities when we get to that location. And instead of kind of relying on our nest egg as a way to sell it off to be able to afford this transition. Because initially, like, we planned on just merely living in the United States, and then waiting for our kids to be fully grown, and then we just retire in one of our houses that we own. And I'm not trying to say like, oh, one of our houses, we own so many houses. Watch my previous videos and you kind of understand what I mean by one of our houses, okay? But the main point is, like, it's all these sort of things where we make intentional sacrifices such that we live the life we wish to live rather than sort of working so that we'll have something to live for, right? I'm not saying that correctly. Like, instead of working to live, instead of living to work, we work so we can live. However that phrase goes. But the point is, like, we value our life so much that we don't make work as a central feature that identifies who we are as a person. We are people who live our life as we want to live it, rather than having to, like, oh, we have to drudge through work every single day. It's a pretty nice library here in Texas. Boop, boop, boop. I will say it's really hot outside. Ooh. Okay. Alright, so I'm printing, and it's going to be about $2 with this one. So the first of yeah. Another print is going to be this one. So I'm just going to go ahead and print it. Yep. Always clear your cache data. And it was as simple as that. I wasn't even there for a total of like 10 minutes, right? Yeah, so you might look at this and you tell me like, hey, this is kind of ridiculous. Like, just pay the money for the printer, or there might be an easy way to do all that. But these are like little minor hacks that we have been doing for quite a long time, from repairing things ourselves to extending the use of whatever items. Like, I'll get into another like cheapskate sort of like living, just kind of tell you some of the things that we do to be able to afford things. I will buy soap from Costco, okay, and I will mix the soap with half and half water to be able to afford said item, to be able to extend its use, its utility for a long amount of time. Or I will basically reuse containers for other purposes, whether it's yogurt containers to make additional yogurts. In fact, we make our own homemade yogurts. We cook at home, we eat at home, we make our own burgers at home, like a lot of different things. So while it may seem like it takes a lot of time, and it genuinely doesn't, like, this library is like less than 10 minutes. Like, I would say on a good day without any traffic, it's like maybe 5 minutes if I hit all the green lights. It does not take long at all to get to this library. And the printing was even if I had to pay for something, it was still very affordable, given the fact that I don't have to pay on a regular basis for all the, to maintain a printer. It take up space in my house, all the things. It just makes sense. So, like, I really have to kind of put it to Americans to say things shouldn't cost what they cost, and there are creative ways, if you live intentionally, to be able to afford a lot of the various different things. And sometimes it's necessary. In my case, needing to go back to work, it's necessary to take back on the toxicity of a workplace to be able to survive, or not even survive, to be able to leapfrog yourself into the next adventure of our lives. In my case, I'm needing to go back to work to save up some initial relocation capital. I'm wanting to like have $100,000 of just like spending money, not to spend it and blow it just unnecessarily, but I'm thinking we need at least like $30,000 for relocation costs without having to dip into our overall nest egg, like I mentioned. In addition, I'm wanting to have like an additional $70,000 by way of being able to buy property or a business venture, start a business venture in some continent in Africa, in some country in Africa. And for example, Ghana, for example, you can buy land for about $8,000, and then I can use the remainder funds to be able to start up a factory of some sort. So like these are some of my long-term goals, and I don't want to have to dip into my actual nest egg to be able to finance it all. With my nest egg overall, how we kind of work things out is we have cash flow already, by way of like $4,000 of cash flow from between our dividends and rental income. So for me to take $100,000 out of our nest egg means that that cash flow would come down to like $3,500 or even lower, depending on what all happens. I don't want that cash flow to dip down. Instead, I would rather work an additional year or so, because I wasn't ever planning on relocating and moving elsewhere to outside the United States. Instead, I would much rather work up to have maybe $100,000, $200,000 based off of this gig that I'm about to go pick up. Hopefully I get hired. And in addition to making additional content here on YouTube and additional businesses where I have some software company that I'm trying to get off the ground as well, I have a lot of things being in the works. So by doing that, I'll have this capital that won't impact negatively my cash flow. And so that's kind of how I approach these things. So once that initial capital is invested by way of relocating us to another continent, to another country, once that capital is deployed and implemented, we bought that land, we now have the machinery necessary to build a factory somewhere in Ghana, and as well as I'm still relocating, and my primary home will be in Vietnam or Thailand, and I'll travel back and forth. That's another piece of it, traveling flights back and forth. But once that initial capital is invested and settled, we can be sustained by our existing dividends and our cash flow from our rental business, and not to say anything of the new business opportunities that will hopefully work out by way of this YouTube channel, and as well as by the factory that I implement somewhere in Africa. So that's the philosophy and approach. And I wanted to document this particular interaction here just to illustrate when I talk about in my previous video that we live our lives extremely dedicated. This is what I mean. Again, like and subscribe. I really should say like and subscribe early in my videos so that I can get more people to like and subscribe and show that this video is relevant to other people on the internet. Anyways, I'll see you in the next one.